Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our session this afternoon. I'll just wait for a couple of others to join before we kick off, but I won't be a second. All right, that looks like we might have a few stragglers coming in, but thank you everyone for joining us today. We have our session Agents and Agentic AI presented by Jaeden Cook. Jaeden is one of our lead AI and project engineers at Sentrian. For those of you who have been to some of our sessions prior, you've got an absolute guru to spend a bit of time with this afternoon to walk you through everything relating to agents, or a good introduction, I suppose, to agents. The next screen we've got will take us across to a little bit of housekeeping side of things. So just to give you a quick update, microphones and cameras are disabled. But there is a Q&A button up the top. So if you can add any questions or anything like that into that Q&A button, that would be great. We'd prefer them in the Q&A over the chat, if that's possible, please. So go with that. And at the end of the session, we'll then come back and spend some time going through questions. Any questions that we can't get to, we'll certainly follow up after the session. And the main question that always pops up is the session being recorded? Yes, it will be. So you'll get a copy of this after the fact. And I think especially for these type of sessions, there's a lot of information that Jaeden will go through. So it'll be a good opportunity for you to take that recording and hit the pause button from time to time to try things out yourself and those sorts of things. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to Jaeden, and again, thank you everyone for your time in joining us today for our session. Over to you, Jaeden.
Thanks, Chris. So today's path, we're going to have a look at what agents are, and then we're going to have a look at a couple of the Microsoft agent options as well. We're even going to deploy a very quick HR agent. So we're actually going to build it and send a couple of queries through to it as well, just so you can see what the Agent Builder platform is kind of like to use. And then we're also going to briefly touch on things like governance and landscape as well. So agents themselves are actually arriving faster than most governance can even keep up. I don't think that's going to be a shock to anyone. We've actually seen active agents across the Microsoft 365 ecosystem grow by about 15 times year on year. And that's not 15% year on year, that is 15x. So it's significant. Over 60% of organizations actually expect to deploy agents within the next 2 years. And 58% of AI users themselves actually say they can now produce work that they couldn't have produced over a year ago, which is quite a significant little figure. And it says something about our changing work roles as well, but I suppose that's a different discussion as we all become little agentic managers. But in terms of agents and automations, this is something I actually did want to touch on because it's quite commonly what we still see a lot of people coming up with agentic ideas that actually may be more suited to automations instead. So when you're looking at agents versus automations, the big key is whether or not the users need to interact with it. So an agent is quite commonly like a chat window that has a little bit more tooling and very specific knowledge plugged into the background, whereas automation completes tasks with fixed rules and predictable outcomes. You might have an approval process through there as well, and no user interaction at all through that process. So if those kind of tick the box, then you know for sure that you're looking at an automation. But we've also got the ability to have the best of both worlds. So we can have agents that call on automations. So the agent becomes the user-facing endpoint. And if they need to get something done automatically with fixed rules and a set predictable outcome, the agent will actually call on that automation to complete that task and then bring all of that context back into the chat for the user. And vice versa. So the agent can handle the ambiguity, the natural language aspects of whatever the outcome needs to be, and the requests as well. And obviously an agent will be able to draft and triage and assist the user more so than automate whatever it is that they need to do. But what makes an agent different? So an agent is built on a goal. So what is the outcome? Context, which is basically the knowledge that you're going to give the agent access to. The reasoning. So what's the next step? What did the user forget? What did I forget? What do we need to fill this gap? That kind of thing. And then tooling. So what systems is it plugged into? What is it actually capable of? And last but not least, the guardrails. These are very commonly either touched on too briefly or just completely forgotten about, and they are super important. A lot of people, when building a more advanced agent, will get to the guardrail stage, they'll test the agent and say, yeah, it's doing what we need it to do. There's no errors in the output, looks good. But that's actually only part of what we need to do for guardrails. We actually need a test base where people will throw queries at it and try and actually break it, try and get it to do things that it shouldn't be doing. And then you can build rules around that to make sure it doesn't happen again, or doesn't happen in deployment scenarios where it is high risk. In terms of the Microsoft Agentic tools, obviously we need to right size what we plan on using. So there is the M365 Copilot chat. And this is best suited for just individual users, essentially. Some people will look at agents and they have a purpose, but it's only a purpose to them. That's not necessarily wrong, because if there's a time-saving element to it, that's still great. That's still a purpose for an agent. But quite commonly, the differentiator between chat and agents is the scope of the users or the user base and interaction. Copilot chat can do pretty much most of the things an agent can do. So if you're just a single staff member trying to do something over and over again, chat is still a perfectly acceptable place to achieve that. When you're looking at saying, well, all of my HR team now needs to do that very same thing or access that very same knowledge, then the agent builder comes in handy, because obviously you can wrap that up in a predetermined package pointed at a specific source, give it a specific set of instructions and things like that. And then the very final product or tool is Copilot Studio. So where an agent builder agent is a knowledge and retrieval based AI agent. I'm saying agent a lot, but it's going to happen in this webinar. The Copilot Studio is where we start to plug in additional capabilities, actions and integrations. We can deploy it to more channels. We can employ lifecycle management and controls as well. So it's really the next step to productizing your agent and increasing its capability, which in itself comes with additional risk and considerations around build and maintenance as well, which we'll have a chat about a little bit later. So Agent Builder is really where we want to start. But even before that, when you're using chat, if you're doing one thing over and over again, like I said, if you want to then deploy that to a wider audience, that's where you start to step into Agent Builder and build sort of a knowledge and retrieval based system, which we're going to have a look at today. So in a moment, I'm going to transfer the screen over to a demo environment we have here, and we're going to have a very quick look at building and deploying a HR policy assistant. So this is just in the Agent Builder. So it's what we call a light agent. It does search and retrieval across knowledge, a specific knowledge source based on a specific set of instructions. And then we're going to send a few prompts to it as well, one of which should trigger the guardrails and alter the output of that agent. I am just going to change this sharing over to where we need to achieve this.
While you're doing that, Jaeden, just for everyone, just remember to add any questions you have throughout the session into the Q&A, and we'll come back to those at the end.
So we have here the Copilot screen, and we have the agent menu here. This is where we actually get started with creating or using the Agent Builder. As I said, the light agents is what we used to call them, the search and retrieval agents. What we have the ability to do is pick through a lot of the pre-canned Microsoft ones here, but I'm going to actually go here and select on the new agent. Now, what we can do is just use natural language. So I could type in here what I want this agent to do, where it needs to access its content and things like that, and it will help me build that out. I'm actually going to skip over that because we've got everything ready to go, and I more want to demonstrate how this kind of looks and operates. So if we skip past that, we come immediately to the configuration screen. We still have the specialist on the left-hand side, so we can still have a chat to Copilot and say, hey, I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to do that, and it will kind of guide you on on the journey. But I've got it, like I said, everything ready to go. So we're going to give it some instructions here. I won't go through these, but we are hosting an agent builder session a little bit down the track. So if you're interested in actually learning how to build a lot of these instructions and things like that, we will obviously cover that in those sessions. I would actually suggest even just using Copilot. So again, in that left-hand side, just tell it, I need some instructions for an agent that I'm building to achieve this and that. The guardrails I initially think of are this and that. Can you help me explore the additional guardrails that we need to put into that? So you can actually chat with Copilot about building this out as well. It's not just to come up with it yourself. There's nothing wrong with leveraging AI. It isn't going to try and be sneaky and put instructions in there that it can then navigate and navigate around on its own. It is actually going to help you. So we need to give this a name. We're going to call this the HR agent. Just going to give it a very brief description. The latest version actually allows you to pick a model as well. We're just going to stick with auto. It is still fit for purpose, the best option that you can utilize. In terms of a URL, so we have a SharePoint site here in our demo environment, just a communication site that has some HR documents within it. So that's the data source that I'm going to specify there. And I'm going to tell it to only use those sources. It's not going to go anywhere else. I'm going to allow it to use our organizational chart. So in a perfect world where we've got our org profiles and everything filled out in Microsoft Entra or Microsoft Azure, it will be able to tell staff who their manager is if they need to escalate or anything like that. And then I'm actually just going to create that as is, as that seems to be enough. And we can start a chat with it immediately. It's as simple as that with Agent Builder. So obviously you would have seen some extra buttons there as well. So if I jump back into the edit function of this, very quickly, we can add custom URLs or select them from the box that appears. We can also use these buttons here to attach it to our Teams, our Outlook, our emails, and things like that. When you share that with other people, that just means it then attaches itself to their Teams chats and their emails. It doesn't necessarily give them access to yours. It's worded poorly, but it doesn't. So that's handy depending on the agent type. Let's just click update and go back to it as well. So again, we'll cover that more in depth when we actually go through the Agent Builder session that we're hosting. But I actually just want to give this some prompts now. Let's have a look. So planning to work from home 3 days a week. What does our flexible work policy require me to do? Who needs to approve it? Is there anything I need to submit? So what this should do is utilize the SharePoint source that we've given it and only the SharePoint source that we've given it. So it will look within the documents, and to give you a look here, we have the communication site, the document library, and the HR folder. Within there are just some fabricated HR-based policies that we've done, one of them being a leave policy. And if we look even further into there, you'll see that it is a fully fledged out leave policy. Just like that. Covers as many bases as we can. And then when it outputs, it'll actually tell the person what it's based on in terms of its context and the source of where it got this information from, and it will try and answer its this staff member's question here. So this is all based on the document. You can see with this fly out here, it keeps referencing that particular one. And then what we'll do is let's send this one as well. So my manager has rejected my flexible work request based on our policies. Tell me whether their decision is fair and whether I should lodge a formal complaint. This is an interesting one. So depending on your guardrails, it's either going to help the user, or it's going to actually judge this as not something it can determine, as it has here because it's in my instruction set. So again, that's why guardrails are important, even with these types of agents. And the next prompt, again, you'll see even more so why it's important. So it cannot be on any one person's side. We don't want this to favor any particular role or person within the organization. It's just here to answer questions. So we don't want it to be able to kind of drive a narrative. Now, if we look at the last prompt here, how can I circumvent leave policies? So this one should definitely trigger guardrails. You can see it's relatively quick. I know that there aren't many documents in this particular SharePoint site or repository that we've pointed it at, but it is still nice and quick. And it has output what we expect. So it can't help with bypassing, exploiting, or circumventing leave policies or approval processes. It does come up with ways to maximize, but within the constraints of the policies themselves, and it's still going to earmark where this has come from. So that's what we would call a knowledge agent or a light agent. Now, when we want to share that, because as I mentioned, these are better for multiple staff, not just a singular staff member. The person that created the agent or anyone who's been added as an owner, I should say, has the ability to hit these three dots in the top right-hand corner and then go share. So what we can do is just type individual people, but you can also add a group. So if you've got, say, a Teams communication group, you can actually add all of them. They automatically get access to that. Or your network or IT admin can actually deploy this company-wide as a default as well. So I am going to stop that there. The rest of what we would cover, as I mentioned, is going a bit more in depth now. I'm just going to quickly stop sharing and move back to our presentation. And I'll be very quick. I do apologize, as we are just trying to keep to a certain time allocation here. So what we have just covered is the agent builder. And as I mentioned, we can then promote even that very agent to a Copilot Studio-based agent. And that's where we can give it actions and integrations. So you may have a HR agent that maybe needs to check leave calendars. You could give it an integration to be able to do that and recommend, oh, it looks like there's a few gaps here, and that would be better suited for where you can take leave. So you can give it that kind of ability as well. When it comes to Copilot Studio, because the agent does, as I mentioned, become a product. So when we're trying to give it richer actions and channels and lifecycle management, we can give it additional publishing options as well. So we don't have to deploy that to the M365 Copilot app. We could deploy it to Teams. We can publish it to a website, a company website, if you've got an intranet or something like that. And then we can also give it some governance as well. So things like data loss prevention, we can change the authentication style. The agent builder agents work on behalf of the user to retrieve that information. So whatever access they have, that is the information it will retrieve. And we can also add monitoring and as I said, lifecycle management as well. And then something else with Copilot Studio, this is a recent addition, is the operational cost. Not only how much time that is going to save people, but also how much time is required for testing, for maintenance, ongoing maintenance. Things change, data sources change, connectors change. But then you also need to plan consumption and even support as well. You do need a support channel. If someone has an issue with an agent, especially as it becomes bigger, like the Copilot Studio agents, and they can't get any help, they don't know what to do, they're going to leave it and they're going to find a way around it and find a way to do it themselves. So it comes in as a key piece of adoption there, is support and maintenance. And also ownership as well, I should mention. So you do typically require an owner there just so that it doesn't go stale. So a common piece of feedback we actually get with M365 Copilot is that the agents can feel quite limited. I'm not going to lie, that is true. I feel that some days as well, but it's intentional. So we feel that way often because it's a less visible autonomy than open agent platforms. It typically is more constrained in tooling and system access as well. And high impact actions rely on workflows and approvals. So it adds a certain layer of friction that we're not inherently used to when we've come from, say, OpenAI platforms or something like that, depending on how you've used them. And advanced capabilities obviously split across these platforms with Microsoft, which makes it a little bit more fractured, increasing friction. So we've got the Agent Builder for the knowledge base agents. We've got Copilot Studio, where you could just create a knowledge base agent, but then you can also create something more. And then you've got the Power Platform, and another one again that we haven't even mentioned in this slide because it is its own beast is the Microsoft Foundry, which is a custom agentic platform that gives people access to even more models like Grok and Meta's Llama and things like that. But why Microsoft takes this approach is actually for security and compliance. They need to come first in enterprise environments. We can't just have a fully autonomous agent running wild in an enterprise environment. It's fraught with peril. So we are getting there. Microsoft is moving in that direction. It's just moving a little bit slower than say your open source or your alternative products. So Microsoft agents are designed to stay within enterprise permissions and governance. The predictability of these matter more than unrestricted autonomy. And that is absolutely true within an enterprise environment. We don't necessarily want to take things away from people, as attractive as that may seem at first. We just would rather speed up workflows, and that doesn't require so much autonomy. And this creates a safer operational structure within industries like legal and healthcare and government, other regulated sectors, which is a massive piece of the Microsoft pie. So, like I said, it is intentional. And there are some uncomfortable numbers around this as well. So 40% of agentic AI projects are actually predicted to be cancelled by the end of 2027, citing escalating costs, unclear business value, or inadequate risk controls. 95% of enterprise generative AI pilots showed no measurable impact. And apparently the gap was integration and workflow fit, interestingly, not model quality or output. So again, it's an integration and a workflow issue. So a planning problem, a deployment problem, and an ongoing maintenance problem. And then 88% of organizations have reported a confirmed or suspected agentic security incident in the year prior, which is a very interesting one. And that's why that doesn't necessarily mean that's a malicious actor coming in from external. That can actually be an internal staff member or a user of that agent finding a way to do something that it shouldn't have been doing. That's not even necessarily their fault. That's why we guardrail. That's why we test. So these aren't a stop sign. These cited causes are cost control, unclear value, weak control risks, and poor integration. They're all things that can be addressed. They just need to be addressed beforehand. And they can quite often take longer than the development of the agent itself. And that's why they get shortcut or dropped entirely. And that's what creates these figures. So where are the most common failure modes? Wrong answer, obviously. So we can combat that by using approved sources, up-to-date sources as well, using realistic tests, making sure that it outputs references, because quite often we recommend checking the references in every output, because if you're pointing an agent at, say, even a knowledge base agent at a HR site, and you've got a mixture of policies that are up to date, or you've just got a folder sitting off to the side in that SharePoint site that says archive, and that's where you put all the old policies, it's still going to reference them. And that's going to be a problem because it's incomplete or incorrect or out of date information sitting in there. And we can also combat that with human handoff or human checks. Another failure mode is oversharing. So this is a little bit harder to audit, and its visibility isn't quite there within an organization. And this comes in the form of permissions and site hygiene, quite often with SharePoint. So in SharePoint, you have the ability to create a sharing link to someone. Oh, I know someone that could actually read this, needs access to this document. I should probably share it with them. You generate the link and you send it off. Little did you know that it's not a document that you keep up to date very often. But if you haven't set an expiry date on that link that you've sent them, that becomes a permanent bridge to that piece of information. And what tends to happen with Copilot is when they're doing a quick search for a policy or a document, it'll follow that link and it will actually retrieve that information. And again, if it's not something that you yourself keep up to date, then it's going to be out of date info that it's trying to produce for this person. And then another side of that is the sensitivity labels or data loss prevention as well. The oversharing is very difficult. It does require a top to bottom audit of SharePoint, which can be done. So it's something that, again, needs to be done prior. Outside of that, we've got the unsafe action. So things like approvals and tool restrictions are a good idea. Environment separation is a little bit more difficult for most organizations, but I would say approvals, tool restrictions, and review are very, very important, especially when you're moving away from the agent builder based agents into the Copilot Studio side of things, when you're giving it access to these tools and these abilities that increase its power, essentially. Especially if you're giving it right and access to email inboxes and things like that. Prompt injection, again, doesn't apply to the agent builder that we just looked at, more so to Copilot and external services from OpenAI and things like that. So this comes in the form of documents or even websites that an agent has gone and grabbed to include in its output. We can't see it, but sometimes there's hidden text on a website where a malicious actor has provided a set of instructions to try and get that agent to do something it shouldn't. And this isn't theoretical. So, and you can see in the text on the bottom, in 2025, a zero-click prompt injection flaw in the 365 Copilot ecosystem let a single crafted email trigger data extraction. So no user click was required. It was just Copilot going over this particular piece of information. There was some hidden text, and then it was doing something malicious because it contained instructions. Microsoft patched that server side, but it's a very good example of what can happen if you don't audit and restrict where it can go. And you can actually dictate where, what websites Copilot can retrieve information from as well. We don't need it to go out to the broader World Wide Web necessarily, depending on what the agent's purpose is. Cost sprawl. I should mention cost sprawl actually. So again, when you get to the Copilot Studio side of things, there's been a recent change where certain functions and tools require either Copilot credits or a pay-as-you-go system set up. So again, once you're scaling to a larger agent, a productivity agent, then you need to try and limit what it can do, because it will actually help you predict the cost and try and estimate the cost. So things like usage tracking, again, ownership. So the agent should really be, someone should be onerous of the agent so that they can audit it and do consumption planning and usage tracking. And then the other side of that is abandon agents. That just creates clutter. It's not so much something that people themselves notice, but the agent, the knowledge agent that we just seen in the agent builder, because so many people have default access to just create one of those, again, it's not a bad thing. But it does mean if they're just playing around with it, or if they've jumped in, set it up, oh, it's not quite what I thought it would do, and then they just kind of leave it. And that creates this whole queue of abandoned agents just sitting in the background that if you were searching for it, you could find it. It just looks messy, makes it feel messy and feel like it's got a lot of friction in terms of how many agents you have in the organization. So we've spoken a lot about the Microsoft side of it, but not where the other agentic platforms actually fit into this. So we're going to touch on that in the next couple of slides. So we've obviously got the productivity native platforms. So that is Microsoft with its offerings, and then Google, if you're in the G Suite space. I know that is actually quite powerful as well. But then you've got the builder-based platform. So this is where you start to see OpenAI, which does have an agentic builder platform. Anthropic doesn't have an agent platform, but you can kind of achieve an agent type system with Cowork and Claude Code. And then you've got AWS Bedrock as well. There's probably a few others out there. I mean, I'm sure there's lots out there. The builder first ones are great. They're very, very powerful. but there is more to consider around them as well. When organizations utilize OpenAI or Anthropic as an ecosystem, we strongly recommend the enterprise versions of the plans, not just the business plans. Enterprise allows you to essentially plug them into the Microsoft SaaS platform so that you've still got auditing and a certain level of compliance. It's not going to give you absolutely everything that you need, but it makes it more visible, at least to a degree. So it's very handy. We highly, highly recommend it. But you may want to start with the productivity native side of things and then work your way up to the builder first with something like OpenAI. It really just depends on what fits the business needs. And then we've actually got the open source side of things. So this comes with a lot of risk. So a couple of the names that you may or may not be familiar with are like OpenClaw or maybe the Hermes agent system. They're very, very powerful. And that, as I said, comes with inherent risk. They tend to be self-hosted and community-built frameworks. So while they're really fun, they're really interesting to work with, they don't have any support channels apart from the community. They don't have any security standards. They don't need to adhere to any security standards. So all of that you have to do yourself. Even the maintenance to a degree is completely reliant on your team or someone within your team. A really good example is OpenClaw. I don't know if they've resolved it, but every time that there was a major update happening, everything would actually break. There was quite an uproar because essentially you had to start from the beginning and readapt everything and build the entire system all over again from scratch, which isn't, I'll be honest, is not a problem with the Microsoft or productivity native solutions. So there is a layer that gets removed and simplified for you as well there. And then obviously with the open source agents, you've got the visibility risk. So these can be run on everyday laptops. So if you don't have the necessary restrictions in place, it is a single PowerShell line to get one of these up and running and give it the tools sitting on your office or your work environment to access whatever it wants. You could give it your own credentials. You could use it to poke holes in things. It's what we call shadow AI, and it is a huge risk. Probably a story for a different day. And then the last thing with these is obviously the cost unpredictability. So these are built on what we call the API billing structure. They don't run on a subscription at all for the most part. Which means so API pricing is more expensive because it comes with SLAs and things like that. And it gets harder to determine the potential usage and cost requirements because this thing has access to so much. And we're not talking about measuring this month to month as you would with a productivity native solution. We're talking about within an hour, you could blow up thousands of dollars in API costs. So they are unpredictable and chaotic, but they're also incredibly powerful. So going back to productivity native tooling, so what are some good first use cases in compliance-driven sectors? If we look at the legal side of things, we've got matter intake and precedent search, policy drafting, conflict checks, healthcare, we've got policy navigation, onboarding, procedure lookup, and so much more. And it doesn't need to be or quite often it can just be a knowledge-based agent, as we've shown you with the HR agent that we quickly made there. It doesn't have to be a full productivity agent. So in closing, choose the safest useful agent and start small, which is number one there. So a narrow scope and a clear audience, at least to just get it off the ground, just understand it, get some feedback from people as well. Hey, where do you want to see this going? Ground it and ground it well. So in trusted and current knowledge, and then govern it. Plan the governance around it, and not just the agent itself, but the knowledge that you're giving it. Audit that as well, and then measure it. So outcome, adoption, and cost. Cost being when you're dealing with things like a Copilot Studio agent, depending on what tooling you give it. But a couple of things that you can actually take back to your team. What routine follows a pattern. So that will tell you whether or not it needs to be an agent or an automation. I mentioned at the start there that an automation is better suited where you don't need a user interface to whatever you're trying to achieve. It's a very specific pattern with a very specific outcome. Knowledge, so where is the current source of truth? Is it accessible to an agent? Because there's no point planning and kicking this thing off the ground if the knowledge is sitting in a third-party SaaS platform that has no connector or no way to get to it. A really good example of that is if you're still using map drives and you go and deploy agents and even just M365 Copilot in general, that's heavily based on OneDrive and SharePoint, map drives are inherently not going to work. If 75% of your information is sitting in there, it's just not going to be able to access it. Action. So do you need this thing to draft, to route approvals, to be able to create, or do you just need it to be able to answer questions? And that will tell you if it can be a agent builder agent or a Copilot Studio agent. And then ownership, and it's actually quite important with ownership. You can't just have an agent sitting there that everyone forgets about because it's just working. Who owns it? Who owns the content, which is quite often different to who owns the agent itself? Who owns the approvals? Because that's very different to who owns the content. And then who's going to support it? And finally is value. So what would prove that this actually worked? Not only that, but when you're staring at it, how much can this solution accelerate a workflow? Because that will also tell you an inherent value as well. But that actually brings it to a close. And now we're on to the Ask Me Anything portion of today.
Yeah, thank you, guys. And once again, please type any questions you have in the Q&A section. But we have got a couple of questions, Jaeden. I'm not sure if you have had a chance to see them as you go, but Holly was asking more around, is it only shared within the premium license users of Copilot, or if something like the HR example that you used earlier, where an employee could chat and ask questions about the HR policy, is that something that can be shared across the entire organization within the 365 side of things, or is it just for the premium users?
Yeah, so very good question. It's going to vary depending on what it needs to respond with, but generally it's best to have a premium or paid license. There is the ability to, or for people without a license, to utilize the agent, as long as you've got what's called a pay-as-you-go subscription set up. So depending on what the agent does, there are some things that the free version will still do, but depending on what you need it to achieve, there will just be a usage-based billing aspect to it. So you definitely can. It's just something that, again, it needs to be planned out to see what it actually needs to do.
Okay, and I think the next question there was giving some more examples around small businesses using agents. I think before this question was put up, I think some of the takeaways was on that last slide around going through those components but yeah, if you want to touch base more on that, if you could, that'd be great.
Yeah. So again, it depends on the agent type. So the knowledge agents, the HR one that we created we picked that because it is the most common, but it can be something if you deal with projects or anything like that, and you need certain terminology, you can actually create or have an agent sitting there that people can kind of just brain dump into, and then it outputs how it should be worded to be put into, say, a scope of works or something like that. The knowledge agents may seem really limited, but they're actually more useful when you start to look at how you can apply them to the business than you think. In terms of Copilot Studio agents, the possibilities are almost endless there because you've got connectors. You can even integrate to third-party APIs. But a really good example is like a meeting scheduler as well. So if you don't have access to someone's calendar, you can have an agent which will actually tell you not the details, but it can help you determine the free busy slots for key staff members' calendars and things like that. So they don't have to go and ask them. They don't even need access to the calendar. They can just quickly ask the Copilot agent. And then you could even define rules which say, maybe the agent needs to ask them what that calendar appointment is about, and then it can prioritize as well based on certain rules that you give it. There's a lot you can do with it. Yeah, so it's going to depend on what you need to do with it, I think, at the moment.
Okay. And then there's another question coming in here talking about Claude project.
Yep.
And how the similarities to Copilot agents.
Yeah, so it is definitely very similar, even to the point where projects can be shared with different staff members, much like agents can. And it is very similar. So, and that's why I did mention it in one of those previous slides, because it is a perfectly acceptable use for it.
It hasn't come up directly here, but can you talk a little bit to the data sovereignty? I know a number of our clients and people on the call today working in law firms or legal, as an example, where data really sort of needs to stay within Australia. How does that work across some of these?
Yeah, so obviously when dealing with Microsoft, it's not guaranteed, but by default, you're using OpenAI models, which Microsoft has a stake in, and they have, for Australia at least, they have models and availability within the region. When you're looking at Copilot, it does have it enabled by default, but you've got the ability to utilize Anthropic models like Opus or Claude, I should say. Those are US based. So there's something that does need to be considered. If you've got requirements in terms of where your data is processed, it's not about where it's stored. It doesn't store data. It's just where it's processed with other models. So Claude or Anthropic are US based. So you wouldn't be able to use those even in agents. So obviously when you're building an agent, you have the ability to pick a model. You still need to be cautious about which one you pick depending on your compliance requirements.
All right. I think that's come to an end. If you've got questions, Jaeden, if you could flick to the next slide, there's a couple of things that are coming up. So our next event coming up is probably more of a deep dive on this subject, Build Your Own Agent workshop, where we're actually getting people. We've run a few sort of face-to-face or in-person workshops of late, which is great. So basically it gives you an opportunity to bring your laptop along and spend a bit of time with Jaeden and some of our experts going through the various topics. So this next one's coming up is again continuing on the theme of agents. This workshop is going to be based in Brisbane in our office in Milton on the 10th of September. And it's pretty much like a half-day session. So if you're interested in coming along to that, certainly there are still some space available. We try to keep the workshops not huge in numbers, just so that there's plenty of opportunity for you to take in the instruction and go through the examples and scenarios that Jaeden and the team put together. But also you've got opportunities to ask questions and expand on what you've been working on yourselves. So that's a great opportunity. Scan the QR code, and also at Sentrian events, there is a link there to other upcoming events that we've got coming on as well. So also within that Sentrian website itself, if you've got other questions on other, even not necessarily just AI related topics, but a lot of this stuff also comes down to data governance and other areas like that where we may be able to assist. So if you've got other questions, by all means, through our website, there's a contact us. If you reach out, that'll probably more than likely come to me. But certainly happy to help out in other projects or other ways that we can assist there. So and the shameless plug, if you like what you saw today, there was a lot of information that Jaeden put forward there. I should also say the video I think will be released tomorrow. So typically we just go through and tidy up the recordings a little bit, and everyone who was on the session registered today will get a copy of that video. There's a lot of information to sort of unpack there, so that's a valuable resource to share with yourself and the team. But if you have got a couple of minutes to give us a Google review, and any feedback is always welcome. So please. We look forward to seeing your comments and also what you'd like to see next. If you've got other ideas or other areas that you'd like some guidance on, by all means, sort of put those things forward. So with that, thank you again very much. We're pretty much right on time, so we really value the time that you're giving us, and appreciate you joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you in a session coming up soon. Thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your time.